Welcome back to another episode of The Road Chose Me. And today I'm going to run through the 5 biggest myths related to driving around the world. And you know, I drove from Alaska to Argentina, I drove all the way around Africa, but this isn't only based on my experience and what I learned along the way. This is coming from the hundreds of people that I bumped into along the way doing exactly the same thing. It's also accumulated from the thousands of people that I've talked to online and in person at shows like Overland Expo. And this is a topic that's really near and dear to my heart. And to be honest, it actually ticks me off quite a bit. Because what I see online, and I am really active, on Reddit, on Expedition Portal, obviously now on YouTube, I see a lot of people who are new to all of this, and they come along and they say, hey, I'd really like to drive down to Tierra del Fuego, or I'm planning a trip around Africa, what do you think? And time again, these 5 topics come up, and they're presented in such a way that it sounds like they're deal breakers, or that it means the entire idea is impossible and stupid and that nobody should ever do it. And that makes me angry, because my goal here with The Road Chose Me is I want to teach people, I want to inspire people, and I want to show people that this kind of expedition, it really is achievable for ordinary people like me. I'm just a regular guy and I did it. So I've learned along the way, these 5 myths, they come up so frequently, and I want to put them to rest. I want to nail them down and say, that's not true. And if you come across someone on the internet who's saying this kind of stuff, I mean, we all know arguing on the internet's pointless, but my advice to you is don't listen to them. They don't know what they're talking about. So with that out of the way, let's get into it. The 5 biggest myths about driving around the world. So the first myth that I want to put to rest is the idea that it costs a fortune to drive around the world, and that you probably have to work for National Geographic or be sponsored by a car manufacturer or something, to be able to afford the trip. And this is just completely not true. I did a whole video on how much it actually costs real people to do it. Safe to say, I spent the same amount of money driving from Alaska to Argentina per month as I was spending every month just to go to work. By the time I paid rent and car insurance and gym membership and food, that was the same amount of money as living on the road and driving 40,000 miles over 2 years and having the adventure of a lifetime. So it doesn't have to be expensive. My friend Joanie, who just did the same trip by herself, she spent even less money than I did. And I've bumped into plenty of people on the road. They're not doctors, they're not lawyers. These people are bakers, they're mechanics, they're school teachers. They don't earn a ton of money. These people aren't rich. They've just prioritized saving money for years and years and then choosing to go out and have these mega adventures with that money that they've saved up. They don't have the latest and greatest iPhone. They're not driving brand new vehicles because they prioritized spending the money on adventure instead. So I really want you to get it out of your head that driving around the world is going to cost a fortune. That is utterly not true. And anyone who says that, they've never actually gone and done it. We can be sure of that. The next myth that always comes up, and I think it really stops people from ever leaving home, is the idea that it's really dangerous, or that there's people out there around the world who are going to get you and target you because you're a foreigner and because you're driving a vehicle. And I bumped into hundreds of people around the world who never had an experience like that, not even once. So I don't think it's true that it is crazy dangerous or that it's vastly different from the life you live at home. The idea that there's people waiting around to get tourists is just preposterous. I mean, yeah, maybe in Mexico there are some drug cartels and maybe there is violence, but let's be honest, those guys are busy with their drug empire. They don't have time to just wait on the side of the road with guns and chase after anyone who happens along. What do you think, they're going to wait for like weeks and months doing nothing until you show up? No, they're busy doing whatever it is they do. When you drive past and mind your own business, they don't care. They're busy making money doing whatever they're doing. So get it out of your head that there's just guys waiting around to get you. It just doesn't make any sense. And people told me Africa was going to be so dangerous, and especially all the experts on the internet said that I was going to get beheaded on the first day. And those people, they have no experience. They're just not living in the real world. When I got down to southern Africa, like Botswana, Namibia, Zambia, I met hundreds and hundreds of Europeans who've spent years driving around southern Africa, having the time of their lives. They just roam from national park to wild camp, back to see animals, living their dreams out in the wild, and they've never once had a single problem. So this idea that it has to be much more dangerous than home, it's just not true. And I had a really good example of this. Not long before I was going to Uganda, someone actually got kidnapped there. And so a lot of people contacted me and they said, you know, you can't go, it's really dangerous. Well, so I looked into it, and it turns out no one's been kidnapped in Uganda for like 10 years. And Uganda gets about 1.3 million tourists every single year. So let's exaggerate and say that one tourist gets kidnapped every year, which means your chances of getting kidnapped in Uganda in any given year is about 1 in 1.3 million. It's hard to know, what does that actually mean? Well, it turns out the chance of you getting struck by lightning if you're in the United States in any given year is 1 in 700,000. So that means you living in the United States right now, you're twice as likely to get struck by lightning in a given year than you are to get kidnapped if you go to Uganda. Have you ever worried about getting struck by lightning? No, you haven't. So to go to Uganda and worry about being kidnapped, it just doesn't make any sense. The media has hyped it out of proportion, and they've taken away our ability to judge how likely it is to happen. So put it aside. Tons of people have driven from Alaska to Argentina. My friend Joanie, she did it solo. It isn't as dangerous as people make it out to be. And time and again, when I see this come up on forums full of people who've really done it, you see tons of replies from people making jokes like, yeah, the biggest danger is the spicy tacos, or the biggest danger is you're going to spend all your money because you're going to love it so much you'll stay for so long. You know, Colombia's marketing slogan these days is, the biggest danger is you'll never want to leave. So keep in mind, the world is not nearly as dangerous as the media makes it out to be. And anyone that's never been there, they don't really know what they're talking about. The next myth that I see talked about online is that to drive around the world, you're going to need the most tricked out vehicle ever imagined, and you should spend at least $100,000 upgrading some brand new vehicle. This is just nonsense. And in fact, of all the people I've bumped into driving around the world, I've never met anyone that has all of those accessories and has spent all of that money on upgrades. You just don't need that stuff. And people who are really doing it, they don't have all of those gadgets and they haven't spent that much money. Almost everyone drives a used vehicle. Almost everyone is on a budget. And so they're doing it by saving money and not just throwing money at this huge, big tricked out vehicle. Further to that, everyone assumes you have to have four-wheel drive and that roads are going to be, you know, ridiculously impassable with mud up to your waist. And that's just not true. The world is way more developed than those people realize. They've probably never left home, so they don't know. As an example, I bumped into Laura in Tanzania. Laura's from New Zealand, and she drove a 1958 Morris Minor, so probably the worst overlanding vehicle that anyone could imagine. She drove it from Scotland all the way to Cape Town in South Africa. So she crossed all of Europe, shipped it to Egypt, and then drove from Egypt to Cape Town, the really famous run that everyone dreams about doing in Africa, in a 1958 two-wheel drive carbureted Morris Minor. The thing broke down like 20 times in Sudan, and she said she had a great time because she met so many locals. So if she can do it in a little Morris Minor, you can do it in whatever vehicle you want. I met some guys who drove down to Panama in a rust bucket old Subaru. I met plenty of people in Latin America who bought local vehicles that were falling apart, and they'd driven them around for months and months and months and were having a great time. So this idea that you have to build the world's best overland vehicle, get it out of your head. That is not true. You don't need that. It isn't necessary. And if you want to, and if you want some creature comforts like I did, sure, some upgrades can really increase your enjoyment on the trip, but it isn't mandatory. You don't have to have it. The next big myth that I see people always talk about is that the borders are an absolute nightmare. And I think this is a holdover, maybe from people who drove down to Central America in the 80s or something, and they had a bit of a rough go. Well, the 80s was a really long time ago, and things are a lot different. So thousands of people drive to Argentina every year, coronavirus aside, and the very vast majority don't have any problems at the borders. They're not something to be afraid of. They're not this huge big ordeal that's going to be terrifying. It's just some bureaucracy. It's just some paperwork. Keep your head on your shoulders, keep a smile on your face, and there's no reason to think that the borders have to be horrible. Yeah, sometimes the border guards want to look inside your vehicle, make sure you don't have guns or drugs. That's fine. They're professionals. They're doing their job. You can help them and you can be friendly, and it's not scary and it's not intimidating. So the next time someone tells you that border crossings are horrible when you have your own vehicle, just ask them and say, oh yeah, when was the last time you did that? You know, when did you drive from Costa Rica into Panama or whatever? And what you're going to find out is those people have never done it. They don't actually know what they're talking about. And then the final myth that also comes up a lot is this idea that bribery is going to ruin your trip. There's all these corrupt police and military, you know, they have automatic weapons and they're going to extort you, they're going to take all your money, they're going to take your vehicle, all of this kind of stuff. And again, this just isn't how it works in the real world. Yes, you might have to deal with some extortion attempts. I've got a couple of videos about how to deal with that, but it's not going to ruin your trip. In fact, tons of people drive all the way to Argentina without ever experiencing a single bribery attempt, and people have told me the same about Africa. I've never heard of anyone getting a gun put in their face or getting threatened or anything like that. Tons of people drive around the world without ever paying a single bribe. You play games, you make jokes, you be friendly. Bribery is not going to ruin your trip. It comes up from time to time. It's a little bit like getting a flat tire or some other small inconvenience where you say, you know what? I'm out here having this enormous adventure. I'm having the time of my life. If that's the downside that I have to deal with once a month or a couple of times a month, you know what? It's worth it. So anyone that tells you that extortion and bribery are overwhelming and they're going to destroy your trip, they're not living in the real world. They probably had one bad experience and now they're afraid of it. But don't be afraid of it. Don't think it'll ruin your trip. You can have an amazing adventure, and bribery is just one of those things that comes along. So next time you see a discussion about driving around the world, I hope you'll keep this information in mind. And if someone comes along and tells you the opposite of what I've just said, maybe you can ask them and say, oh yeah, when was the last time you did it? When was the last time you bumped into someone who's driven through more than 100 countries and has all of this real world experience? Because I almost guarantee you, anyone who says those 5 things, they actually have never done it. They really have no idea what they're talking about. They're just projecting their fears and they're projecting all of the reasons and excuses they've got for not going on the trip. Doesn't mean they're actually true. It's just that person being afraid to give it a go. So I hope this video has been helpful. I hope this finally puts to rest these myths that I'm sick of seeing come up around the internet. If it's been helpful, please do hit the thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and let me know what else you'd like to know, what information is going to help you get out there and drive around the world and have your own grand expeditions. So until next time, big thanks to my Patreon supporters who make all of these videos possible, and let's all stay safe. Hopefully we can keep getting out on adventures, and with any luck, the snow is going to start falling any minute here. So have fun out there, and maybe I'll bump into you on the road.